All right, before we begin, let's go to our Heavenly Father for prayer. And John, my director reminds that.
Father, we're thankful for today and the blessings that it holds for us. We're thankful for our class. Father, we're thankful that John leads us in these discussions of the Old Testament, and we're thankful for his preparation and dedication to us. Father, we're thankful for everyone who comes to this class. Help us to realize that we are an encouragement to each other by coming out and discussing and studying your word together. Help us to realize that strengthens our faith in you. Appreciate your word, Father. Thankful for it. Thank you for preserving it for us. And bless us today as we study more of it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, 2 weeks ago we entered a little bit into lesson number 4. And with lesson number 4, we began our look at Ahab's son Ahaziah, and we saw that essentially his reign over Israel was wicked. And he asked Jehoshaphat to join him in building ships at the tail end of 1 Kings chapter 22, and that the whole concept there just sunk. All their efforts just went down with the ship, so to speak. And so we're going to pick up now in 2 Kings chapter 1 is where we'll pick up here. And let's see. Let's just kind of walk through this. You'll notice there that it covers from 2 Kings 1 verse 17 all the way to chapter 9. But a good portion of that is events with Elijah and then events with Elisha, kind of separate and apart from the story of the king. However, there's going to be a question that we're going to address a little bit later, that if you had looked at the in-between stories of Elisha, the question you'll be able to answer and kind of makes sense. And we'll get to that as we get on through today. So we're going to try to walk through it, and not as much detailed reading, and see if we can finish up this. We have about 4 more lessons following this. We have a total of 8 lessons, and that should put us potentially middle of April, maybe just right at the end of April, depending on how much longer some of these lessons take. So let's go ahead and look at 2 Kings chapter 1. Now, notice here that after the death of Ahab, which nation rebelled against Ahab? The Moabites. Well, the Moabites rebelled against him. Ahab had done pretty good as far as a national kingdom is concerned and everything. And he had kept the Moabites in check. They had made, and we'll read about this a little bit later here, they would make not donations, but tribute, thank you. They would make large tributes to Ahab, and they quit. They quit when Ahab died. And so, that's just a footnote. We'll come back to that later. So picking up here with verse 2, Ahaziah, he's a little bit clumsy, I guess you might say. Says there that he fell through the lattice of his upper room there in Samaria. He was injured. And so, this injury is such that he won't get out of bed until he dies, for all intents and purposes. Now, remember, who was Ahaziah's mother? Jezebel, exactly. And Jezebel's father was, well, I've drawn a blank, but it's got Baal in it. Huh? Baal. Something like that, yeah. Anyway, worship of Baal. And Jezebel's a worship of Baal, and we saw that when we looked at Ahab. Now, notice who Ahaziah turns to in this time of need. Yeah, Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron. And he wanted to know whether or not he would recover from his injury. So he sends his merry band of men to go inquire at the temple of Baal-zebub and find out exactly if he's going to live or die. So as he goes, the angel of the Lord, he intercepts them or intercepts Elijah the Tishbite. And he sends a very distinct message to him. And notice this message here. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you're going to inquire of Baal Zebub, the god of Ekron? In other words, why are you going? Is it because there's no God in Israel? And in reality, there was a God in Israel, but the people weren't following him. A little bit later, and now this is going to be under Jehoram's reign, he's going to show that he exists. All right? He's going to show that Jehovah God does exist. But right now, this is the question posed. And so here's the Lord's answer to the question. You shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. So he's telling Elijah, you're going to meet some men, this is what you're going to tell them. So Elijah takes off and intercepts the messengers, tells the messengers this. The messengers then, they go back. And the thing about it is apparently enough time, this was just a short span of time. It should have taken longer. The king was surprised that the messengers had returned to him so soon. So it's why you come back. And they said, well, this man comes up to us and he says, why, is it because there's no God in Israel that you were sending to inquire of Beelzebub? Therefore, you're not going to come down from the bed. You will surely die. Surely die. And he asked him, who was this man? What did he look like?
He was a hairy man wearing a leather belt.
Yeah, look at verse 8 there. Oh, to be described in such a fashion. He was a hairy man wearing a leather belt around his waist. Well, he knew who it was. It is Elijah the Tishbite. So the king sent a captain with how many men? Yeah, with 50 men. And so they go up, and they go up to Elijah, sitting on top of a hill. And they said, man of God, the king has said, come down. So Elijah answered and says to them, if I'm a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. And what happened? Fire came down from heaven. Yep. Consumed 50 at a time. That's why you never want to travel in groups of 50. 49's better, but not 50. So the king sends out another 50 men with the captain of the guard. And he answered and said to him, man of God, thus and such said the king, come down quickly. So Elijah says again, if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. And of course, it happened again. Word has got to be getting back to the king. Now you're the third captain. All right, the routine. Take 50 men and go find out. This guy's a little bit smarter than his predecessor, at least the second one. First one had no chance. Second one could have learned, but he didn't. So he comes, and the first thing he does is he shows respect. He falls down on his knees before Elijah. Notice what he says. He says, man of God, please let my life and the life of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight. Look, fires come down from heaven, burned up the first two captains with their 50s, but let my life be precious in your sight. So did any fire come down from heaven this time? No. Because here, you think about it, someone may say, well, why such a drastic measure? Probably to instill fear into the captain, so that when he takes Elijah, delivers the message, that there's going to be the ultimate respect for Elijah's God. Kind of speculating there on that. But what other lesson could he learn from this? The God of Elijah is not Baal Zebub. The God of Elijah is a true God. So he says to him, don't be afraid. Or the Lord telling Elijah, don't go down with him, don't be afraid. And he said, thus says the Lord, because you sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is there no God of Israel to inquire of this? Therefore you won't come up from your bed, you'll die there. So, what happened to Ahaziah? He died, exactly. So Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken. Now, Ahaziah didn't have a son, but he did have a brother, Jehoram. Jehoram, his brother, is now going to take the throne and became king in his place in the second year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Different Jehoram. Two Jehorams at one time on the throne. A little bit confusing, but that's the end of Ahaziah's story. All right, any thoughts? Any comments about Ahaziah? All right, very brief. Very brief and short-lived. I think probably if we're going to talk about what is the primary lesson, is the fact that he knew about Elijah. He knew about Jehovah God. He should have turned to him. But his belief was in a false God. And he believed strong enough in the false God to want to know whether or not he was going to live or die, and didn't turn to Jehovah God. Any thoughts?
Well, he followed after the footsteps of his father.
He did.
And his mother was as wicked as his dad was. And he, I mean, that's how he was brought up.
That's
In
right.
that respect.
And that's a good point. They, during this time frame, because they all, because of their history, they would have known of Jehovah God, just as they knew of all the other gods. But
Well, look what happened on Carmel. I mean, Jezebel knew that.
exactly.
I mean, that was evident. That's why she went after
Elijah.
And wanted to kill him.
Yeah. If anything, it should have said to her, well, maybe I'm back on the wrong God. But instead of doing that, she gets mad. Yeah. So that's right. I mean, they knew about it. But for whatever reason, and it's like today, there are people who study the Bible, who know about or know of God, but they don't follow him. And even some who claim to follow him, they'll still be parts and pieces of the Bible they reject. And there's no different, in effect, than what happened back then. Any thoughts? Okay.
Well, I questioned some things here just because of looking at the next discussion of Jehoram, and it says that Ahaziah died and Jehoram became king in the second year of Jehoram in Judah.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Math doesn't work. No, that didn't work.
Walk me through this.
Okay. Jehoshaphat reigned 25 years.
Okay. All right.
Ahaziah started in the 17th year
17th year. Jehoshaphat.
of Jehoshaphat.
All right. So we're going to jump forward in time down to 17. So that would leave.
8 years left.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Then Ahaziah reigned 2 years.
Okay.
So we got more than 2 years for him to, according to Jehoshaphat, reigned 6 more years after Ahaziah died.
Right.
And then when you go on into, let me see where I wrote it, 8:16
Of 2 Kings.
of 2 Kings.
Okay.
It says that Joram took the throne in the 5th year of Jehoram in Judah's reign.
So so now in the 5th year of Jehoram,
5th year of Joram,
the son of Ahab.
then Jehoram becomes king of Judah.
All right, let's see. The 5th year of Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel. Jehoshaphat having been king of Judah. Jehoram the son. Okay, so in the 5th year of Jehoram, king of Israel, Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat takes the throne.
Yeah. But over here. Okay, I got it.
Does it make sense now?
Yeah.
Good.
I've had a really hard time with the Jehoram and the Jorams and all of them in the same place.
Well, I wasn't anywhere close to finishing being able to help you out. So I'm glad it clicked. I might start backing up and grabbing a bunch of numbers and writing them down. Yeah, it is odd because Jehoram is Joram, but depending on who you're talking about, it's either the king of Israel or the king of Judah.
Well, I think once you start getting into Second Kings 8, where you're talking about both of them.
Uh-huh.
Jehoram of Israel becomes Joram,
Yeah,
and that
Yeah.
helps to divide the two.
that's true. So it does kind of make sense?
I think so. I'm trying to build a timeline, and it just,
Yeah, no, it's, because the timeline hinges on, they always reference the other king. And if it's a long king and multiple kings in the other, then they'll say in this year and in that year, and this year and that year. And, yeah, it can be kind of confusing.
Isn't there I think there is, somebody has developed a timeline with both Israel and Judah, the kings, where they are kings at the same time, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one, but it's
Rick.org.
Bill, did you have a comment?
I didn't have any comment.
Okay. Well, you're looking at your Bible like you did, so I just.
No, I was just looking at the years they reigned, and the two Jehorams. Jehoram of Judah reigned 8 years, Jehoram of Israel reigned 12 years.
Okay. Let's see if I can bring. Well, that's why I don't like Pinterest. You'll have something there, you click on it, it's nothing there any longer. Let's see. Oh, this will work. See if we can get it large enough. And we'll bring it over here. And let me see. All right, it's really, really small, but we'll kind of see if this will help us out here any. It doesn't give the necessary timeline per se, but doesn't give us any dates, does it?
There's one at Britam.org.
Who?
At BRITAM.org. And it has the whole roller coaster ride of the
You better spell that again.
BRITAM.org.
.org? Oh, there we go. Okay, let's see. Which one are we looking at here?
Kings of Israel and Judah.
All right, let's see real quick. There we go. All right, well, okay, this one comes from there. The one that I had up there.
There it is. That's
Okay.
that has the dates
There's a
on it.
roller coaster. All right, let's bring this over.
That
And,
would be even more visible.
well, we do this on. Oh, it's got a responsive page, which means it's harder on the graphics to,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I thought there was some available.
well, that's the thing, Brenda, there are, and I have in my office a couple of different charts that would break this down. I just never thought about pulling them out there. I should have. But this is different though, Rhonda. This is more of,
It has at the bottom. It has the dates. It's just you can't see them.
oh, down
Or,
here.
well, like that line running in between them says 900, 800.
Oh, okay.
And so it shows the overlapping years, but it's hard for you to see on there. Perfect for your cell phone.
Well, at least I can look it up.
Yeah, you definitely can. And I'll tell you what, if you give me a couple minutes once we're done, I'll grab the book, we'll have all that.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I tell you what I'll do, if I think about it before next week, I'll run off a copy of that for everybody to have, just for the records there. Yeah. All right, let me get. All righty, I'm checking the. So make sure I don't have any comments. Wait on us. All right. So where did we leave off at? The death of Ahaziah. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump to chapter 3 in our text here. We're going to skip over Elijah. And if you've not read the story of Elijah and Elisha in a while, it'd be good to go back and look at it. Let's see. So now we come back to Jehoram, the son of Ahab. And here he becomes king over Israel at Samaria there in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. How long does it say Jehoram reigned there? Yeah, reigned about 12 years according to this. And again, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as bad as who? Yeah, it's really hard to define, isn't it? He says he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and mother. For he put away the sacred pillar Baal that his father had made. So he made some progress towards, but still the overall definition of his reign was evil. Okay, but he did not go as far as they did. But he kept, though, in the sins of Jeroboam, which means he tolerated idolatry, might have even promoted idolatry. He made Israel to sin like Jeroboam did. He did not depart from them. All right, let's come back to Moab. All right, the Moabites. Now, Misha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he regularly paid the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. Remember earlier, verse 1, kind of made that little footnote comment that Moab quit. They rebelled against Israel. Well, here's what they were doing. King of Moab was paying a pretty heavy tribute here to Ahab, the king of Israel. You think about 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. That's a high tribute. That's going to be a lot. And so he stopped doing that. He rebelled against it. So Jehoram, he decides he's going to take matters into his own hand, and he musters all Israel so they could catch up with. Never mind. So look at verse 7 there. The king of Moab, who did Jehoram turn to for help? Jehoshaphat. Now you would think Jehoshaphat said, now, I got together with your father once before, and it didn't fare too well for him. But there's his family tie, family relationship there because of marriage. So Jehoshaphat, upon request, says, I'll go up with you. I am as you are. My people is your people. My horses are your horses. And so they say, which way shall we go? So he decides that they should go by the wilderness of Edom. And when you read the description here, this appears to be a somewhat roundabout way of going to the Moabites. And what happens, when they go through the kingdom of Edom there, they end up picking up the king of Edom. So it's three kings now kind of going into battle there against the Moabites, or at least that's what they're heading towards there. You have Jehoram, you have Jehoshaphat, and then you'll have the king of Edom a little bit later. But when they come to the region here, what is it that they do not find?
Water.
Don't find water. Okay, as they're going through the region of Edom, they don't find enough water there to water their animals. So, he says, alas, for the Lord has called these three kings together to deliver them to the hand of Moab. It's interesting. There's a couple of times here that Jehoram is going to say the Lord has called these three kings together. It's almost like he's giving credit to God for this. But at the same time, the term Lord there still could be referring to a false God that he might believe in. But a little bit later, though, a little bit more is going to happen that will kind of paint the picture that maybe he really truly believed that this was the will of Elisha's God. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So he's about to give up. For the Lord has called these three kings. Look, we have no water. This is doomed to fail. But what does Jehoshaphat tell him to do? You got a prophet of God that we can talk to? A prophet of the Lord? So, there was one. And who was this prophet of the Lord that he's going to end up talking to? Exactly, Elisha. So one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, Elisha the son of Shaphat is here, who poured water on the hands of Elijah. So they call for him. Jehoshaphat knows the Lord's word will be with him. And again, we three kings are King Jehoram, King Jehoshaphat, and the king of Edom. So Elisha says to the king of Israel, what have I to do with you? He says, you turn to the prophets of your fathers. It's only because Jehoshaphat is here that I'm going to help you. That's effectively a paraphrase of what he says. But look at this statement here. The king of Israel in verse 13 says, no, for the Lord has called these three kings to deliver. The Lord has called. You know, he says, why don't you consult the prophets of your fathers? He says, no, the Lord has called. So, you know, he is at least attributing this great venture to Jehovah Lord. And so Elisha says, as the Lord of hosts live, before I stand, surely, were it not that I regarded the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look at you nor see you. So Jehoshaphat again is in favor with God, and God is going to help him out. So he calls for a musician to come, and the Spirit of the Lord is going to move the musician to convey to him the message. You know, what is going to take place here. And so here's what he says. Make this valley full of ditches. You shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain, yet that valley shall be filled with water, so that you and your cattle and your animals may drink. And this is an easy matter for God to do. So they do. They go and they dig a whole bunch of ditches there and everything. And he says, also you shall attack every fortified city. What does he tell them to do and all that? What did they used to do back then? When they were going to go into a territory, they wouldn't simply just go against the capital and take the king. But what did they do to the land oftentimes? Huh?
And they burn it?
Yeah, they would make the land effectively unusable for years to come. You know, it would be like us going through and not simply scorching, but laying down pesticides or something highly toxic, you know, in the land there. And so here it says you'll cut down every good tree in every choice city. You'll stop up every spring of water. You'll ruin every good piece of land with stones. That's no small endeavor. I mean, think about it, because it's kind of, there's a field over there. There's a pile of stones. Let's bring it with it. We're going to put it on the field. And devastate the land. What's that term they use? There's a military term. Whenever they come in, they completely devastate the whole land. Ron, what was that game we used to play where you had a little tank and you would fire?
Scorched earth.
Yeah, scorched earth. They'd come in and do a scorched earth. Let's remember. It's a scorched earth policy, where basically complete devastation to the whole of the land. So even if there were people that remained in the land, they couldn't use the land. You know, it was terrible as far as if you were the victims of this. And if you were the invaders, is how you guaranteed that people couldn't rise back up anytime soon and rebuild their civilization.
I was thinking about in the colonial days when they were trying to inhabit the new territory, they had to clear all the stones out of there so the farmers could till it, you know.
That's true. That's true. There was, it's the term a rock garden, but there was a movie years ago called Sergeant York, if I remember correctly. And when the movie began, the land that was left to his family was in an area that was just rocks. I mean, it was very hard for them to hoe through. And after what he did to save everybody and so forth, I think they gave him a new piece of land or something. But anyway. Any thoughts?
There's a lot of things mentioned here that it's easy to read, but it'd be hard to do. You know, how did you transport 100,000 lambs, you know, back then? And what was it? Was it 100,000?
The wolves of the rams. Yeah.
100,000 lamb or sheep.
Yeah.
You know, that's no small task to just transport that.
Yeah.
And if you think of how big a parcel of land is, how do you run it with rocks? How do you haul enough rocks in there to run that?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you have a large piece of land that you tended many years to your grass, you have perfect grass, let 20 kids come over and play ball. Don't mess that yard up. So I say that facetiously, but if you make the numbers 5,000 men, and 10,000 men, you know, depending on how many they had with their three armies combined there, you definitely could do that. But you're right, though. For us, it'd be a daunting task. I mean, you got to find the rocks. But and the valley here, you think about a valley. we're probably not talking about in no small piece of land either. It's probably up on a mountain, and a large enough area for all their cattle, or not cattle, but their horses and everything to fill up to be able to drink. Yeah, it's interesting, and it'll come into play a little bit later here. Any thoughts?
Also, the digging of the trenches.
Yeah,
You're out there in dry land, desert land,
Yeah.
no water anywhere, and you're digging a bunch of trenches.
Yeah. Unless you make makeshift plows to,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's right. And here's, another side lesson. They had to do the work before God gave them what they needed. Right? Small lesson, but it still shows us we still have to work today. We look at the New Testament. Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct that Edom is Esau's descendants?
Yes. Yeah. Edom's. Here's what's interesting. Edom is the descendants of Esau. Moab and the Ammonites, Moabites and Ammonites, are descendants of Lot's two daughters. So they're all family. They're all family here. They don't live like it. And there's one event, I'm almost certain it's with the children of Israel carried off into the Babylon captivity, but I'd have to go back. I got to find the source again of the story. Anyway, when people were beginning to escape, from Jerusalem, when they were like under siege, they tried to get away. The Edomites would stop them. The Edomites would capture those and turn them over to the Babylonians. And there will be a later prophecy against the Edomites because of this very thing that they did to their brother. Instead of helping them out, they would capture them and turn them over to the invading army there. So it's interesting, you would think family might have meant something, but back then, going this far back, it didn't. Yeah, thoughts?
It's interesting that they're out in this desolate place, and Elisha just happens to be there.
They're
out in this desolate ground, right?
Yeah.
And he calls and says, "Is there not a prophet?"
And Elijah's.
He's there.
Yeah. Either there or close enough for them to send for him. He may have been intentionally, the Lord may have sent him to be there with them. A little bit later, there'll be another, and then this will involve the king of Syria. They'll have to send to Dothan to get Elisha a little bit later here. But yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. Either Elijah had went with them or followed them, or was close enough nearby they could send someone to get him. But he was there. That's a good point. All right, any other thoughts? All right, so let's continue here there in verse 20. So it happened in the morning, when the grain offering was offered, that suddenly water came by way of Edom, and the land was filled with water. All right, so we have the grain offering being made to the Lord. The water now is coming. Now, when all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, all who were able to bear arms, older, they stood at the border. And when they rose up and they saw the water, and the sun was shining off the water, what did they think the water was? Yeah, they thought it was blood. And it was as red as blood. And so they said here, this is blood. The kings have surely struck swords and have killed one another. Now therefore, Moab to the spoils. All right, so hey, this is perfect for them. Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and the king of Edom have turned on each other. They've killed each other. There's blood all over the place, running with blood. Now all we got to do is go in unprepared for a battle and get the spoils. And so they go in, and what happens there is that there's a call to arms, and they find themselves being attacked. And the Moabites fled, and they entered into the Moabites' land. They killed the Moabites. They destroyed the city. They did everything they were told to do, destroying the land, the scorched earth policy, might say. The only thing they didn't do, notice here, but they left the stones of Kir Haseth intact. However, the slingers surrounded it and attacked it. And that was probably already a rocky area. They didn't need to go and mess up. But they still, just in case there were any people that escaped that area, had their their slingers, or those, probably slings and stones, if you would, and surrounded it and attacked it. Battle was too fierce for the Moabites. He took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through the king of Edom, but they could not. Took his eldest son. Here's how you know someone is really dedicated to their false god, and they don't like their son a whole lot. What did he do to his oldest son? Yeah. Offered him as a burnt offering upon the wall, and there was a great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. Interesting way that's worded there. But he sacrificed his own son, paid the ultimate price, you might say. Because, you know, it's one thing to pay your own life, but to pay with the son of the life of your son. And it generated, in some translations might read it a little bit differently, but it says here, and there was great indignation against Israel. And so they went back. Matter of fact, what does, let me call it something, but I forgot about this. The English Standard Version renders it, yeah, and there came great wrath against Israel, pointing in the direction because Israel had driven him to sacrifice his son. Though the Edomites, the way they would feel about Israel would change. The Rotherham Emphasized Bible says, again, the great indignation as well. And one more, let's look at the Holman Christian Standard Bible just for comparison. Great wrath was on the Israelites, and they withdrew from him and returned to the land. Okay, all right, this helps us to understand it just a little bit better, okay? Reason why I say, the way this one paints picture, the Holman Christian Standard Bible. So he took his firstborn son, who was to become king in this place. This is the king of Moab. He offered him as a burnt offering on the city wall. Now, great wrath was on the Israelites, and they withdrew from him and returned to the land. It suggests here, with this reading, that this one event made the Moabites so angry, so wrathful against the Israelites, that the Israelites ended up stopping what they were doing and heading back to their home. And with that kind of view of it, we'll go back to the New King James translation, it kind of makes sense. And there was great indignation against Israel from the Moabites, so Israel departed and returned to their own land. Any thoughts? Any comments? All right. Okay, let's see here real quick. We've got about 15 more minutes. All right, any thoughts or comments about this before we go to chapter 6? All right, let's jump ahead here. Apologize, people at home. I leave the Bible verses up and I start scrolling through them. It looks really disorienting. So let's see. All right. Almost there. Oh, by the way, a mental footnote here before we go on. The story of King Naaman. Naaman was the commander of the army of which king? Syria. Okay. So Naaman learns about Elisha and learns about the power of God. Okay. How to file that away. That'll be important here as we hit this next section. All right, so let's see. The question is, how do you make an axe head float? Call for Elisha. All right, so let's continue now. So now let's bring the king of Syria. Remember, Ben-Hadad, still the king of Syria. Who did Elijah appoint as the next king of Syria? Hazael. Okay, Hazael. And within a short period of chapters, if you would, that comes to pass. Ben-Hadad will die and Hazael will take the throne. But right now, it's still Ben-Hadad, is still the king of Syria there. And so he consulted with his servants, and he wants to get his servants' advice here. My camp will be in such and such a place. He's talking to them, he's planning to attack the children of Israel. He's planning to go into the area there. And so he's in the privacy of his servants, and he says, my camp will be here and my camp will be there. It's a private meeting. No one else is supposed to know the contents of this meeting. So the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, probably Elisha. He says, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. All right, so he takes the message there to King Jehoram. Don't go over there, because the Syrian army is going to be camped out over there. So the king of Israel sent someone to the place. And sure enough, what did he find? The Syrian army. All right, now, this is going to perplex the king of Syria. He's greatly troubled. He wants to know who in my group prefers the king of Judah or the king of Israel. Who's the blabbermouth? Who's the spy? And the servant said to him, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet who is in Israel tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Now here's my question. The Bible doesn't tell us. But who was that servant who knew about Elisha? I don't know who. But the point is, remember Naaman? Naaman, the commander of his army, met Elisha. Well, he didn't meet Elisha. Or he came through Gehazi, Elisha's servant. But he was told, the king of Syria was told to send him there because of a servant knew about Elisha. And so this king is perplexed again. And this time it's because secrets have been spilled. And the servant says, well, Elisha there, notice what it says, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Naaman was a commander, wasn't he?
Commander of the army of the king of Syria.
So he'd be very close to the king.
Yeah.
But servants had their own network,
Yes.
and servants could know that Elisha was saying, I mean, they wouldn't have to necessarily believe in God, but they just have their own network and could very well have passed the word that Elisha was.
Oh, sure, because they'll listen when others won't. Because they're hearing everything, and they're able to talk about it in secret and everything. With the story of Naaman in chapter 5, I should have mentioned this one as well. Look in verse 2. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. So that's how that girl knew of it, because she had been taken in a raid. And so people talk, maybe the same servant, same raid, who knows, Regardless, though, they knew about the power of Elisha. Yeah, and that's a good point. The servants, man, a lot of shows, a lot of shows kind of depict the complete separation between servants and those whom they serve. I'm not a huge fan of Downton Abbey, only because I've not watched it. There's not real sci-fi enough for me. But they do paint that same picture: the separation between those who serve and those who are being served.
Well, and the people that they're serving tend to ignore servants.
Yeah. They're not worth what they have to say is not worth listening to.
And also ignore them talk without realizing a servant is listening because they just ignore them.
Oh, and the servant's over here. Yeah. Mary?
I think it's in, excuse me, Ecclesiastes, I think. It says, be careful in your bedroom to speak anything against a king, because a little bird will tell him. So that's just referring that there are people there. The secret will get out.
That's
people
right.
are going to hear you.
Exactly. That's exactly right. People you ignore the most are the ones that will hear what you have to say.
Here you have the upper crust trusting in their own power and their own might, and you have the servants still trusting in a superior being. And the kings are looking for a mole,
Yeah.
and the servants are saying, God's prophet's going to tell them. God is going to tell Israel what's going on. You have a group of people who trust in themselves, and they get all carried away with worldly things, and then you have their servants still thinking in a different way, giving credit to a superior being, God. And I think that may be part of this too. You know, the prophet of God's going to tell the king of Israel what you say in your own bedroom.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And also time-wise, you think about it, there's enough time after Elisha took over Elijah's place for there to be a raid, where they're going to be captured and taken back. And, you know, and began to talk. I mean, because here we have the servant now, this servant saying the same thing. It's interesting to stop and think about how that would work. Any thoughts or comments? So the king says, all right, go get him. I want to see this man. So he says he's in Dothan. This was really meaningful when we lived in Alabama years ago, because there's a Dothan, Alabama, but it doesn't mean anything now. So it goes over to Dothan. And he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. So they come by night, they surround the city, and the next morning, Elisha and the servants go outside. And what do they find? A large army. And his servant's scared. His servant says, I'll ask my master, what shall we do? And he says, don't fear, because those who are with us are more than them. And so he prayed. The Lord opened the eyes of his servants, and all around them, notice what they saw. The mountains were full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. It's amazing. Amazing. They were not alone. And so this gave confidence to Elijah's servant. So the Syrians came down to him. Elisha prayed to the Lord. It makes you wonder if the Syrian army, those who were surrounding him, wondered why Elisha's servant smiled. You just wonder about that. You know, if he saw what Elisha saw, which he did, he's probably utterly relieved. So anyway, so Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with what? Blindness. Yeah, strike them with blindness. Now, this is interesting because it shows compassion and it shows planning. All right, so they strike them all blind, and then they don't know which way to go, so they say, we'll lead you. And where did they take them back to? Samaria. So here they are, they lead him into the town of Samaria. And the king of Israel, he says, my father, shall I kill them? He says, no. Don't kill them. You wouldn't kill people that you take captive. And not only don't kill them, he says, set food and water for them that they may eat and drink and then return to their master. Look at verse 23. Then he prepared a great feast for them. And they ate and they drank. He sent them away. They went to their master. So the band of Syrian raiders is what's suggested here by the italics there. Came no more into the land of Israel. So there you see intelligence. One reaction, temptation, would have been kill them all. But imagine what message it sent by showing them kindness and compassion. Any thoughts?
Not only that, if you kill them all, then who's going to go back and tell the rest of the people,
Which did?
what happened to you? But this way, they can go back to their homeland and say, hey, don't go up there.
That's right.
Be struck with unsightedness.
Yeah.
Which is more politically correct, I guess, than blindness.
That's right. But it doesn't solve all the problems, though. Because King Ben-Hadad, he still lays a siege to the city of Samaria there. And it gets pretty bad. Let's see. Here's how bad it was. A donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and 1/4 of a cob of dove droppings for 5 shekels of silver. In other words, the things that you would normally probably discard were considered so valuable because they had no food. And so, there's a woman crying out, saying, help me, king. And so, he says, if the Lord does not help you, where can I find help for you? From the threshing floor or from the wine press? And so he says, what's troubling you? And she said, well, this woman over here, she said, give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. That's how bad things got. So, we boiled my son and ate him. That's probably never been said since then about your son. People have roasted other people, but not boiled. So, we boiled my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, give your son that we may eat him. What happens when the hunger goes away? The desperation goes away. And she hid him. That's exactly right. So, the king heard this. He passed by on the wall. People looked. And underneath he had sackcloth on his body. He truly was lamenting. He was in utter sorrow for everything that's going on. So, we've gotten so far that the people are eating their children. So he says, God do so to me and more also if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on him today. Why blame Elisha? Because this shouldn't have happened.
Elisha brought it down on him.
Elisha brought it down on him, yeah. Who else? I mean, because Elisha has proven himself to be an instrument of the Lord. And now this has happened. So,
Bring the messenger.
yeah. So, verse 32, Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. King sent a man ahead of him, but before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, do you see how the son of a murderer has sent someone to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold him fast at this door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him. So while he was talking, in comes the messenger. So the king says, surely this calamity is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? So, Elisha then says, tomorrow about this time, and let's pause for a moment. Why does God oftentimes appear to wait to solve a problem?
Just to show that it is from him.
Okay.
The same reason Jesus waited outside the city at the death of Lazarus.
Okay. Delayed before going in.
So that they wouldn't say, well, he just got here and he recovered.
You show the power.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. Sorry about that. So,
Here's a cough drop.
you got one? Thank you. Appreciate that. I ran off without them this morning. And I got shocked too, thanks. So Elisha steps up. Okay. The Lord is sending Elisha to do this. Tomorrow about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. In other words, things are going to return to normal. Things are going to be affordable, go back like they used to be. So, there's one officer, he's standing beside him. He says, look, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, could this thing be? And he said, in fact, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. So in other words, the one that's doubting, you'll see it happen, but you shall not eat of it. So, as we continue through here, we're not too far from at least the end of this story. We'll need to continue a little bit more next week. During the course of this, you've got 4 lepers. They enter the gate, and they said, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say we will enter the city, the famine is in the city, we'll die there. So they don't want to go into Samaria, so they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to the Syrian army in hopes that they'll keep them alive. So they rose at twilight and go to the camp of the Syrians. And when they got there, what did they find?
No one was saying.
Yeah. Sorry, that's contagious. So, why? Why was there no one there? What had the Lord done?
He made the sound of a big army coming.
Exactly. Yeah. Caused the army of the Syrians to hear the noise of chariots, the noise of horses, the noise of a great army. So they said, look, the king of Israel has hired against us the king of the Hittites, the king of the Egyptians. We're going to be slaughtered. This is going to be a devastation. And they fled at twilight. But they didn't simply flee. What did they do? Or what did they not do, really?
Well, they left everything behind them, all of their belongings.
Exactly. That would have been a neat thing, I think, sir, to have been there to have witnessed. You know, to hear all this great sudden noise and sound and see them running and leaving everything behind. So the lepers come to the outskirts and they see all this. And they face somewhat of a little moral dilemma. What was that?
Report it or keep it, or, plunder it or report it.
Yeah, do we stay here and keep silent? Or do we go back and tell the camp? Siege is done. And not only is the siege ended, but look at all the great stuff within the camp of the Syrians. And the gatekeeper called out, they told it to the king's household inside. King arose at the night. Let me now tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we're hungry. He thinks that they're setting up a trap. And one of the servants says, please let several men take 5 of the remaining horses. Let us go kind of investigate and see if this is so. So they did. And they went after them to the Jordan. Indeed, all the road was full of garments and weapons which Syrians had thrown away in their haste. So the messengers went back and they told the king. So then the people went out and plundered the tents of the Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for how much? A shekel. And 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now what about that one fellow who said, you'll see this, but you're not going to be able to partake of it? Well, verse 17. King had appointed the officer on whose hand he learned to have charge of the gate. The people trampled him in the gate, and he died, just as a man of God had said. Said, you'll see it, but you won't partake of it. All right, any thoughts or any comments about that? All right, that brings us then to the end of chapter 8. So let's plan next week. The next section is important because it's the beginning of the end of the Omri dynasty. It's the beginning of the end of the Omri dynasty, and all of this because of their disobedience, the family's disobedience to the Lord. All right, any other thoughts? Any other comments? Let me see, I haven't been checking our chat room much this morning. I don't think there's been much participation. Judy's been sitting quietly agreeing with everything that we've said. So, we miss you, Judy. Hope you're feeling better. We got to see Maxine on Sunday, and her son said her leg's looking better. She's still got therapy to get walking on it as much as like she needs to. But if you get a chance to see her, room 401A. What's the name of the place? War Acres Nursing. Yeah, War Acres. Be sure to check on her. Anyone else that we need to keep in our minds and prayers for we dismiss? All right, appreciate everyone coming out, and appreciate those who are watching from home. Let's go ahead and bow our heads, and Dale, would you mind dismissing us in the word of prayer?
Our most loving Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for this day, for the privilege we had of being able to gather together to study Thy Word without fear of persecution. We're thankful, Father, for Your willingness to send Your Son to die upon the cross that we might have everlasting life if we'll be faithful to Thee. And we ask, Father, that You would give us opportunities to be able to go out and study with those who do not know the way, and to also be able to study with those who are spiritually weak. We ask that You'd be with our sister Maxine as she continues to recover from her injuries. We ask also that You'd be with our members who, due to age and poor health, are not able to get out. Use us as instruments that we might reach out to them, that we might always walk and talk in such a manner that others might see Christ in us through our words and our actions. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Be sure to get some pie today.
Hi, Dave.